Well, with the midterm elections about a month away, Hurricane Michael's impact in Florida could be critical for candidates currently holding office. Well, Republican Governor Rick Scott, who is running for Senate, suspended his campaign Sunday night to focus on the storm. He's been holding briefings and will also be touring areas damaged from the hurricane. Democratic Mayor of Tallahassee, Andrew Gillum, also suspended his campaign for governor to also focus on the storm. But it appears that in both of those races, negative attack ads still kept running throughout the entire storm. That's actually considered a break in tradition in Florida politics. For more, Politico's Florida reporter Marc Caputo joins us. He recently published an article on this, and he joins us now from Miami. So, Marc, I want to start with Governor Rick Scott. How important is it that how he handles this? I mean, he's handled many hurricanes before. He's running against Senator Bill Nelson. What does this mean for him?
You don't ever want to really overemphasize the importance of one single event in an election, but understand that Florida elections are always close, at least the top of the ticket races. And so every little thing counts. The thing with a hurricane is it's a big thing. And in Rick Scott's case, we saw his poll numbers in 2017 increase over the way he handled Hurricane Irma. His net favorability rating increased 8 percentage points. That's pretty good. And now that Scott has been in this race, he's been neck and neck with Nelson. The public polls actually have Nelson ahead by an inside the error margin amount. But the amount of exposure that Governor Scott has gotten on national television, on local television, on the internet, in newspapers has been rather large and far larger than Nelson's. And in the end, campaigns are kind of marketing endeavors. And the person who gets advertised the most and looks like he's rising above the political fray usually fares better. And right now you can certainly say that of Governor Rick Scott. Well,
speaking of marketing efforts, you know, these negative ads that continue to play out. I want to run an ad. The first one is actually Ron DeSantis' campaign ad against Andrew Gillum. The next one's followed by the Senate Majority PAC's ad against Rick Scott.
After the hurricane, we had no electricity for over a week. Utility companies lined up trucks to restore power. But as mayor, Andrew Gillum refused help from workers. The trucks just sat while people suffered. Incompetence or extreme politics? I don't know. But leaders are supposed to help people in tough times. And Andrew Gillum, he didn't help us. He failed us.
He promised us
zero cuts out of state general revenue for education.
But it wasn't true.
He cut $1.3 billion from K-12 education.
And gave tax breaks to corporations instead. Scott cut $20 million from pre-K, slashed Bright Future scholarships, and over 1,000 teaching jobs gone. Today, Florida's schools have fallen to 40th in the nation. Rick Scott, another shady millionaire who doesn't look out for you. SMP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Marc, why do you think they chose to run these ads in the first place, and what's been the response to them?
Well, to begin with, the reason you run a negative ad is you want to bring down your opponent's favorability ratings and get ahead. And in both of these races, both the governor's race in Florida and the Senate race, these are essentially tied races. Now, the first ad that's been run by the Republican Party of Florida on behalf of Ron DeSantis, PolitiFact has rated that kind of a mostly false ad. There are nuances to the way in which Andrew Gillum handled Hurricane Hermine, hurricane recovery and power restoration. And in the end, Tallahassee's a tree city. And if you have a city with a bunch of trees and a bunch of power lines and a hurricane comes through, power is going to go out. Now, there is a debate, and I'm not taking sides in that, as to the degree to which he could have welcomed more help. We'll leave that up to the politicians and the campaigns to fight over. For Governor Rick Scott, this ad really kind of strikes at one of the cores of his weak spots, his Achilles heel, which is when he first took over office, he had to cut a whole bunch of spending because they didn't want to raise taxes. And some of that spending came out of education. Education, like in most states, certainly in Florida, is a hot button issue. Yeah, the problem that Gillum and Scott have with these ads running is that they are airing when they are giving messages of comfort, leadership, and advice, so that the commercials are saying you can't trust these guys, they're not good. And then you go to the news programs and they're saying, hey folks, take shelter, don't run generators indoors because you're going to die, things like that. So there is a real conflict between what these ads are selling and what the executives in their non-political capacities are talking about.
Marc, is there a way to gauge how voters have been responding to this?
No, it's too early to tell. And hurricanes are big, messy affairs just like campaigns are. So I'd probably want to see a lot more polling about it. But I think we could say with a fair level of certainty that Rick Scott is probably going to get at least a mild bump out of this because of the amount of media exposure he's gotten so far.
When you talk about media exposure, we also know the president is set to visit early next week. How do you think that could affect Scott and DeSantis' campaign, and how much of an influence could that visit have?
That's a great question. You know, President Trump has been one of the more fascinating characters in American politics, certainly in the past 50 years. And understand this is it. President Trump's approval ratings in Florida is about a -3 net favorability rating, -5 depending on the poll. That's about where it was when he actually won the election here. And the Republican gamble, especially for Representative Ron DeSantis or former Congressman Ron DeSantis, is Donald Trump brought him to the dance, and you got to dance with them that brung you. And the idea here is that they're not going to win unless they get a big Republican turnout. And a big Republican turnout means a big pro-Trump turnout. And no one turns out Trump voters like the big man himself.
Marc Caputo, thanks so much for joining us, Marc.
Thank you.